For this project, I started off with drawing vector patterns to scale to her height at 45 inches. For the wings, this pattern can be purchased from my store. I first printed it out on regular paper at home. Then I cut out the template and traced the pattern onto EVA foam about 6 mm thick. To cut out the foam more accurately and easily, I used a scroll saw. To create the attachments, I split the wing into 3 layers for the base and 2 for the feathers, and glued a PVC pipe as my base. Little Worbla strips were glued inside the feathers to attach to the PVC pipe. I drilled into the pipe and added screws for extra stability. To start attaching everything together, I started brushing the inside with contact cement, let the pieces dry exposed over at least 10 minutes, then stick the layers together. The wing top detail was made with the same pattern, but traced onto thinner foam about 4 mm or 2 mm thick. To prime the wings, this was my first time using XTC 3D, 2 parts of A and 1 part of B. Mixed together, a small amount in a medicine cup covered a large section of the wings. After the wings dried, I sprayed a silver base paint and added black shadows with an airbrush. For the top wing detail, I painted this part with dabbing a brush in acrylic gold paint and used a brown oil paint marker for smaller details. For the wrist and shin guard pieces, I scaled down the armor and I used a hobby knife to cut out the very tiny details. To keep patterns stable, I stuck sewing pins onto the patterns through 2 mm of craft EVA foam for tracing. To attach the details, I carefully applied superglue, also known as cyanoacrylate. Here's a closer look at tracing small details to foam. I used the pen instead of a marker for thin lines. I also used a hobby knife to carefully cut out the foam details. I didn't prime these parts before painting, however, I went straight to spray painting a brown base and airbrushed the shadows. For the details, I used a gold oil paint marker instead of acrylic paint to keep the lines neater. I created gems using easy cast resin on a pre-made cabochon mold, and nail polish on the back for the color after drying. I then finally attached these to the armor pieces to create that finish. For the chest piece, I wrapped my kit up in saran wrap with painter's tape and traced the pattern. I cut it out and redrew the pattern on the computer. I traced it to foam and used the heat gun and knife scores to create the details. I then used the scroll saw one more time to cut 6 mm thick foam. When painting over it, I used painter's tape to mask parts I didn't want to spray paint silver. Then I removed the tape and dabbed layers of green colors to get that battle-worn Valkryie armor look. For the helm pattern, I wrapped the styrofoam head in plastic wrap and painter's tape, drew the pattern with a marker and removed the tape template from the head and used this to vector on the computer. I printed this out and traced it to 6 mm foam. I vectored the feathers and printed it out on cardstock. I superglued the cardstock to 2 mm foam and scored the middle of the pieces lightly with a blunt knife to create the bevel fold. I glued all the gaps together to create the round dome of the helmet. I now attached the foam base helm together with contact cement while using the styrofoam head as a guide. I used 2 mm thin foam for trims and details and attached these parts with superglue to the thicker foam. I then primed the whole piece with XTC 3D. I spray painted the helmet silver and dabbed gold acrylic paint for the accents. For Mercy's weapons, I vectored the pattern and printed it out on regular paper at home. I cut out and traced my sword and shield pattern to EVA foam of varying thicknesses. I have this pattern available for download, which includes these parts. I used a scroll saw to cut out the lines again evenly with thick layers of EVA foam. For the sword, I spray painted the base brown and I masked parts of sections to protect with painter's tape for spray painting silver. I removed those parts and added shadow gradients with my airbrush. For the shield base, I used an EVA floor mat and applied 2 mm craft foam for the trims with superglue. I used the PVC pipe guide I made that will hold the wings for tracing out the opening connection holes for the wings. Again, I masked the shield one more time, similar to how I painted the sword. I also added a black gradient with my airbrush. The fun part is removing all that tape once you're done. For the sword handle, I used faux leather vinyl to wrap, added details, painted it, and attached it to the back shield part. The top of the staff was made using scrap Worbla over foam. I traced my pattern to foam and used the sandwich wrap method for covering the foam with Worbla. I used black Worbla on top for a smoother finish and brown Worbla underneath for the more sturdy structure. My pattern includes all the individual parts for the top 3 sections as seen in this part. I used raw foam for the smaller details and attached the top 3 sections together. Once this part was done, I attached the top parts to a wooden dowel rod for the staff with Worbla and foam for the stick details. I used a soldering iron to create dimensional details. Once the staff construction was completed, I primed only certain parts of the staff for smooth finishes with XTC3D and painted with acrylic paint for the major parts and the oil paint marker for smaller details. When we finished, we went outside to take some pictures. The wing and weapon patterns are available for download, and I have more free tutorials on my site. Other tools are used in the links below.